Hey everyone, this is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we are going to look at the new moon in Sagittarius, which is coming through early this week. It is coming through in a square to Neptune, so that plays a major role in how we're going to look at this new moon cycle. But there are also a variety of other different contextual factors that are going to be really important for us to go over and understand as we approach this new cycle. The last cycle of the year, by the way, last lunation of 2023. So that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections, and you can always find, if you want one, you can always find a transcript of any of my daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Remember that we are in the midst of our 10th annual Kickstarter campaign. We are trying to get the support of 1,777 backers by New Year's Eve. If you haven't already, please consider donating to support our channel and our team. You can find the link to the Kickstarter pinned to the top of the comments section or in the description of this video. As of the time of this recording, I'm recording the intro here, we are at 425 backers en route to 1,777, which means we still need 1,352. That's a long ways to go. I think we can get there, but we definitely need people to pitch in and help support this channel. When you support the channel, you're supporting me and a whole team of people that make this work possible 5 days a week, year round. I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about myself at the beginning of our videos this month so that you can get to know me, my values as an astrologer, the intentions that go into the work, and why I think this channel is worth supporting. One thing that people may not know is that during these last 40 days of the year, in addition to fundraising for 10 years now, I also go into a space of spiritual reflection on the year that has just passed as a content creator and as a practitioner of astrology, as a sort of spiritual student of astrology, and as a content creator who's going to make content in the year ahead. I also try to reflect on what I'm going to do going forward or how I might want to grow or change. So during these 40 days, there's several things that happen, and I thought I'd take some time to tell you about them today. Number one is that during these 40 days, I take time to reflect on the content that I made in the last year. I go over all of the series that I made in the past year, like the, tips for parents, with your kids, through all 12 signs of the zodiac, like what to do if you, how do I work with my kid if they're a Sagittarius? How do I help raise my child if they're a Cancer? That video series and series like that are all something that I look back over. I'm trying to figure out, what did people really like this year? What really worked? What was really speaking to people? And then I also try to figure out, what did I really love? And they're not always the same. And it's really important to look and see, like, what does the audience like? What do I like? And how do I carry the tension between pleasing the audience and making sure that I'm feeling creatively happy with what I'm doing? And I think that's a fine line that a lot of content creators have to walk. It's like, your audience really matters, obviously, but then, like, my own creative genie, so to speak, it also needs to come forth. Otherwise, I start to feel dead, and that's not gonna be good for the content. Even if I know what people like, my heart's not in it. It's gonna be hard to make any kind of content. So I always reflect on that, and I reflect on where I've been, what I've learned, how I've grown, through a lot of journaling and prayer and meditation during this time. That's the first thing I do. And then, as I've reflected on the previous year, number two, I plan, 10 features of the new moon cycle in Sagittarius. I realized after I wrote the list, by the way, that I might end up bouncing around the list because it might make more sense for me to pull on number 10 after number 3. And I was like, gosh, I'm just not sure exactly, once I get in a flow, which order is going to make the most sense. So I apologize if these 10 features of the new moon cycle are like somewhat out of order. I guess we'll live. So anyway, let's go ahead and put the real-time clock up. Here we go. I've been enjoying kind of taking a new approach to the new moons, and sometimes even doing full moons. And I guess my little heart is opening with respect to doing moon cycle forecasting. I had done it for a really, really long time, to be honest with you. And then I get, once in a while, it's like you get like sick of certain structures that are almost like demanded or expected of you. I have a Sun trine Uranus in my chart. I'm rebellious, but not like super in your face rebellious. But anyway, so I was at one point, I was like, I just can't do these moon forecasts anymore. They're driving me nuts. And then gradually, like certain things that drive you nuts, eventually you're like, oh, I miss them. So they've been coming back. If you've noticed, I've been spending more time with new moons and slowly, occasionally doing full moons. But part of that is also because of the Roots and Spheres program. And I want to let you guys know that one thing we're going to be doing, the Roots and Spheres program, by the way, in case that doesn't make sense, is our monthly moon circle that meets up before new and full moons to discuss the astrology of the month, and we work with plant teachers every month. So if you want to check that out, Ashley and I will be doing a preview of the 2024 Roots and Spheres program in a video that'll come out in the next week or two. It'll be looking at the biggest lunation cycles of 2024, and we'll give you a sneak preview of some of the plants we're working with and stuff like that in case you want to join. But it'll also be a good look at the big moon cycles of the year ahead. Anyway, point is, I've been opening up to doing these more, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed has been digging into some of the nuances and details that you really see at the new moon that tell the story of the entire lunation cycle. It's like a seed that's being planted, oftentimes just like conception in, pregnancy and conception. Like you don't know when you're pregnant. It takes a little while to be like, oh, I guess I'm pregnant. I missed my cycle. And then, it takes a while for it to show. And the full moon is a lot like the full belly of the pregnancy. You can really see it. And then the fruits are, often associated with going from full moon to last quarter, where there's a kind of harvesting or birthing and fleshing out of all of the results of the cycle that start with the new moon. So, and long story short, if you want to know what the cycle holds, look very carefully at the signatures of the new moon. But not only that, look at the different transits that will be unfolding throughout the cycle relative to the significations of the new moon. So that's why I've got a list of like 10 interesting little nuances to pay attention to today for the new moon cycle. Okay, well, let's go. So here we have, whoops, I am wildly out of step. Where am I? Where have I gone? Okay, well, here we go. I don't know why okay, here we are. New moon.
Why?
New moon in Sagittarius happening today, Tuesday, December 12th. Got co-present with Mars, and of course the big news of this new moon is also that the sun and moon are moving into a square with Neptune. Of course, the sun will be squaring Neptune shortly after the new moon. Eventually in the cycle, Mars will square Neptune. Eventually, Mercury, through its retrograde, will conjoin Mars and square Neptune. So this month really is the story of a new moon with a bright, interesting square to Neptune. So that'll be a big part of what we talk about today. As the cycle goes on, a couple other features we're going to talk about today. Jupiter, the ruler of the new moon cycle, is slowing down, stationing, and turning direct. So the turning direct of Jupiter as the ruler of the new moon cycle is a huge part of the story. We also have the Mars-Neptune square forming as the month goes on. Month, by the way, comes from the word moon. Isn't that kind of cool? So there we have Mars-Neptune squaring. Another thing that's interesting we'll be talking about today will be the new moon in the bound of Mercury. The new moon at 20 Sagittarius, according to the Egyptian table of dignities, is in the bound of Mercury, which is from 17 to 21 degrees. So we have that. We also have Mercury stationing to turn retrograde and Mercury forming a trine with Jupiter, both at the time of the new moon as the bound ruler of the new moon, and as the retrograde goes on, that trine comes back as an exact aspect. Those are really interesting things. We have the new moon taking place in the third decan of Sagittarius. We're going to talk briefly about that symbolism by visiting a little entry from T. Susan Chang's book, 36 Secrets, A Decanic Journey Through the Minor Arcana of the Tarot. I'll be telling you about one of the tarot cards that she associates with the last decan, which is interesting. It's also interesting to note that as this cycle unfolds, one of the big aspects of the cycle is Venus heading into an opposition with Uranus. That's a really significant part of the cycle ahead. The other thing that's happening, which we visited in a video somewhat recently, is Pluto moving into the last anaretic degree of Capricorn. That will be taking place during this lunar cycle. Mercury and Mars will meet in a conjunction through Mercury's retrograde back into Sagittarius. And interesting, Mercury will be cazimi with the sun on the winter solstice, which also happens not too long after the new moon. So that's a lot of information. here's the way I work. Let me pause. Special message: don't do drugs. No, just kidding. Well, I mean, no, you shouldn't do drugs, but you get what I mean. So, anyway, there is not one way of synthesizing every piece of information that I just presented. They are all interesting archetypal nuances to be explored. Jewels we're going to hold up today and turn around in a variety of different ways to catch light from a variety of different angles and give us things to start thinking about, contemplating, meditating on, or keeping our eyes open for as the cycle unfolds. So this is not an attempt to create some one grand synthesizing story that every last soul will be going through. In fact, it really drives me nuts when astrologers are like, here's what we're all going to be going through. No, we're not. They're archetypes. We all have very diverse, idiosyncratic natures and experiences of the archetypes every month. And so what we want to do is capture some of the big archetypal motifs and speculate about some of the other signatures so that we can be prepared to notice them and participate more consciously with the cycle ahead. That doesn't mean we're going to have one grand unifying field theory here, okay? So just remember that when we look at these kinds of nuances, that's the goal. All right, now let us turn our attention back to the new moon. And these are the 10 features of the new moon cycle in Sagittarius that I want to spend time with. Number 1 is squares to Neptune lead the way. So when you have a cycle in Sagittarius with a square to Neptune, sort of leading the way, what does that mean? Well, a new moon planted in the fiery sign of the Centaur, a Jupiter-ruled sign, pertains to those grand unifying features of our individual lives. Speaking of grand unifying features, so our beliefs, our moral or spiritual compass, our philosophical or political ideals, even the way that we like to order our daily lives to create a sense of coherence or flow. The vision we have for our life and the kind of principles of unity that flow down to us and give us the ideals by means of which we can create a cohesive little personal universe. Cosmos. You guys will hear more about that as the week goes on. So,
come on, man.
This square, first and foremost, suggests, or the opening conjunction in Sagittarius suggests a period of working through, revising, or even implementing things in our lives with respect to our beliefs or the ordering principles of our lives, whatever they may be. So now, new moon in Sagittarius is fiery, it's excitable, it's optimistic, it tends to be very buoyant and light, charismatic. It has a little bit of a crusader feeling behind it. So there may be the kind of conviction of a fire sign behind where we're going and why we're heading in the direction that we are as this moon cycle begins. However, the square to Neptune is really interesting. The square to Neptune, for example, could have us chasing illusions, or could have us fueled by some kind of delusional sense of certainty or self-righteousness. The square to Neptune could indicate, in other words, that there's a kind of fanaticism or a blind compulsion to follow a belief, regardless of how it may impact or affect other people, or regardless if it's really good for us. Like maybe we have not taken enough time
so laggy,
to really consider
man.
it. The allure of Neptune and Pisces is
so laggy.
And
yo, what's up, Ninja? Thanks, bro.
That comes to my mind.
Thanks, man. What's up, dude? How are you, man?
It's kind of like a romantic crusader. And
full
very
health.
Charismatic,
So
very
laggy
charming,
though.
Very compelling. It reminds me a little bit of like the boys in Dead Poets Society.
Appreciate the bits.
There's what was the quote from Walt Whitman in that movie? I sound my barbaric yawp from the rooftops of the world, where carpe diem, seize the day. So that kind of like romantic spirit is really strong in this moon cycle. At the same time, there are many examples of this same spirit being delusional, fanatical. The same kind of romantic zeal can lead people to drugs and alcohol and sort of irreverent, hedonistic attitudes about life, nihilistic, self-centered, like partying, which is part of the symbolism of the centaur, by the way. The centaur sometimes struggles with, how do I hold the tension between the kind of rational, controlled parts of my nature and the wild, horse-like parts of my nature. So, when a new moon in Sag is co-present with Mars, and it's also square to Neptune comes through, it's possible that there's a wildness.
It's just so random.
Restraining, and it can cloak itself
It's just so fucking random.
high-minded ideas that we become fanatical about. So you want to be careful of a sort of fanaticism or blind zealousness.
What's up, man? Thanks for being here. That's a good start. That's a good start. We got fucking ninja lifestyle.
Now, on the other hand, the beautiful thing here is that when there's a real vision, when there is a sense of hope and optimism,
we're really close, man.
You're
it could be any
by
run.
something
Honestly,
bigger than yourself. It's amazing how suddenly it's as though, as opposed to fighting against, you're like in a little kayak or something and you're trying to go against the current of the river, that when you find something bigger than yourself that you can align yourself with, suddenly it's like the kayak gets turned around and now you've got the current moving you. And all you have to do is kind of gently steer a little bit. So this could also be a moment where we move from fighting against something or being in a phase of resistance to finding that connection to something bigger than ourselves that moves us along, inspires us, carries us. That's the real exciting part about this transit, is the enthusiasm that can come and act as a kind of moral or spiritual compass. It just go this way, and all of a sudden you find that there's this mighty current of support, spiritually or energetically, sort of helping you out. But is it mine? Is it my ego? Is it my way? Is it my will? Is it my desires? Is there like a, something like that? That there's a temptation to be swept up in something self-centered or delusional. So we have to be a little bit careful about that, and also the way in which it can cloak itself in, good things. People throughout history, if you think about the ideas that people have been most willing to use for the sake of, like harming other people. A lot of times the people believe that those ideas are good for everyone, that they're somehow noble or virtuous ideas. And then they forget that, killing other people in the name of something you believe in, that you believe to be good, is questionable. So anyway, you get what I'm saying. All right, now the second feature of the moon cycle that I think is really fascinating is that Jupiter is turning direct during this moon cycle. So if the cycle goes on, this is December 12th, by the end of the month, and let's just take this forward a little bit, we can see that Jupiter actually turns direct just after the full moon. So just after the full moon comes through, right around, I think the full moon's the 27th or 26th maybe? Yes, the 26th. So then if you take this forward just a few days later, right at the 30th, Jupiter's stationing and turning direct. So it is really interesting how this cycle, by the time that the belly is showing, by the time that we're ready for delivery, so to speak, on a kind of karmic level, Jupiter, the ruler of the new moon, is turning direct in Taurus. I would like to think that Jupiter in Taurus ultimately is bringing us some kind of reassurance, stability, grace, ease, temperance, a sort of balancing effect. Jupiter in Taurus isn't a stable Venus-ruled Earth sign. Now that's a nice thing for Jupiter to be turning direct as this fiery Neptunian
okay, we're back in the groove. We are warmed up.
Is coming through for the ruler to be turning direct in a stable Earth sign. To me, suggests that the vision is finding, where the temptation is there to go over the top or to become zealous or to go crusading for something. With all the romantic zeal in the world
I applied to a company today called, I think, Grindstone and Co.
Quality that's there to support.
They're like a collection company, a repo man, basically to be a repo man.
Quite literally refers
Should I do it? It's the only job offer I have.
Of a new mode of being.
It's like a call center.
Moon and Jupiter sign.
You call people and scare them. I guess it's the first line of.
Jupiter is so frequently
you call them. That's what they say.
And if Jupiter's
could
about
be
to station
lying.
and turn
Could be just
direct,
a big lie.
a period of having them broken down, or a period
And it's
of
like
setbacks
bilingual.
or delays or revision
So we
or
calling people in
introspection
Quebec
relative to
saying that they owe all this money and they gotta pay it. Should I
the
do
way
it?
in which we're living, and the goals or ideals by means of which we see
I don't think I'm gonna
ourselves
do
in the
it.
future. They're going through some kind of change this month. And Jupiter turning
I read
direct
some
after
review.
the-
I
after
tried
the
to read
full
some
moon
reviews
suggests
online.
that
I don't
that's
know.
what we're in the process of birthing.
Tow truck
this
didn't go
cycle.
great
It could be
for
very
him.
small
No.
things. Don't underestimate how
No.
important
Oh, I remember
small
that
little
story.
changes
I think
are,
you told
and
that
how a
story.
cycle like this,
When
when
did
you
you tell
hear
that
it on an
story?
astrology channel,
I
can
remember
feel
that
like it's this
story.
huge thing, but actually it's a really
Might be.
They might have to do with a different philosophy you're taking with respect to your health or your
I don't know
diet.
though. I don't know if
Could
I
be
want to be in a
slightly
call
different approach
center.
you're taking to your spiritual practices.
I don't like to.
Could be a slightly different
I like
approach you're
streaming
taking
and
to the
talk
management of your assets
a
or
lot, but like
resources.
I'm not a
There's some kind
big
of
talker.
like, philosophical, systematic
I
journey
work every day. I
might be
have one
reflected
ear.
in the cycle, or even a managing
I
of
only
your
hear out of
desires
one ear,
or
so
your
it's like
impulses. So I love Jupiter turning direct as kind of the ruling
from
symbol.
your home.
of
Yeah,
the
it might be
ruler
from home.
and the symbolism
Oh,
of it
dude, it
turning
might be
direct
from
as the
home.
ruler of the lunation.
I would do
All right,
it.
number 3 is Mars.
I'm scared they
Neptune
would like
square,
triangulate my
coming
location.
behind. So as the month goes on, one of the things that
Call
you'll
like
see
a
is that
fucking Neo
Mars
or
is going
something.
to get
It
into
triangulates
square
my
with
location with the
Neptune.
cell towers.
Surprise, surprise! This also happens.
The
right
only
after
Freedom
the full
Mobile
moon.
user in
It
the
is
region is me.
It is a Mars in Jupiter's sign
Yo, what up,
connected to a
Toad?
Jupiter that's turning
What's the
direct.
last thing I lost? Who
Mars
sees what she
Neptune
got?
squares are very magical,
Oh
but
my
they also
God.
tend to coincide with fanaticism.
Oh my
They
God.
can be magical, and it's I've used this. You guys have watched my channel. You've heard me say it a million times. It's the Joan of Arc train.
Ninja lifestyle.
I think she was in a garden when she got the
On the
vision
strip
to, be
with the
be
eggplant.
something of a fighter, right? Like she got a holy call to war. That's very
Fake
Mars
content,
Neptune,
what's that?
archetypally speaking.
Table breaking?
And that call can be a call to action
Farting?
on behalf of a vision larger than ourselves. Surprise, surprise, that was the cycle. That was the new moon signature as well, right?
I
Mars
still
is sort of
haven't
amplifying that
spoken
exact same idea.
to
And
the
no
guy
surprise,
that
it's happening as
played that
Jupiter's turning
farting
direct.
video too. I still
So
haven't
the
gone back.
Mars-Neptune square is sort
They
of
email me every
amplifying
day.
the feeling
I
that this
still
cycle is
getting.
about taking action
I have a
on
calendar alert.
behalf of
For
renewed
8
or
o'clock, it's
shifting
gonna.
ideals or visions for life, and starting to feel
I have not
enthused by it.
returned. I
Now,
quit. I
again,
mean, I did
watch
quit.
for the shadow of fanaticism. Watch for the shadow of self-righteousness.
Fitnoid,
or,
second
sort
best
of
sleep. Oh, you're gonna take a
delusions
nap?
of
That's
grandeur
hilarious.
or something like that. But be excited. It's not illegal to be excited.
Yeah, Toad. I was
The other thing
telling
that I find really
Ninja.
interesting is that, and I'm going to just where I
I
jump around a little bit, that Mercury and Mars will be meeting in
Got
Sagittarius.
a call
around
back
the
for a
same
job I
time. So
applied for.
notice
Apparently,
that
it's call
Mercury,
center
Mercury
for a repo
retrograding
man.
back into Sagittarius comes into
You
conjunction
call
with
people. They say they gotta
Mars
pay their debts
right
and
after
stuff.
hitting a square to Neptune. So Mercury Mars is very vocal. This is where
I don't know if I'm gonna do it.
we might be feeling very vocal.
I'd rather
and
like
very,
deliver food to people.
what's the word I want? Like convicted.
Yeah, that's my
vocal,
thoughts.
Loud,
Want to hear that? Yeah, that's my
demonstrative,
thoughts exactly.
Enthusiastic,
That face.
cheerful, but also sort of provocative. It wouldn't be surprising to see people getting into verbal arguments or spats.
I feel like
People
that would take
you know,
many
sort of
years off my life.
irreverent
If I stay there for a
declarations
few
that
years,
seem
that would
like
take so much
little
time
bit
off
like
my
the Mad
life.
Hatter sat down at the table. You know, the square to Neptune here in the month. This is coming right around again, right after the full moon, which is right after Christmas.
Yeah, I'd rather deliver food.
You can see, wow, there's a signature here of sort of otherworldly enthusiasm.
I think they offered the
seeing
said
beyond the veil,
$23 per
receiving
hour,
visions,
which is pretty
speaking,
good, really good.
you know,
That's
it's
very
great.
good.
Mercury Neptune, by the way, is fantastic
heavy job.
meditation, psychedelic
But it's not
experience,
career money.
artistic transmission,
Good job money, but it's not
ideas
like
that are somehow otherworldly
Can't buy
and
a
yet
house.
suddenly intelligible. But the conjunction with Mars in a fire sign, both Jupiter ruled as Jupiter's turning direct, could also be just what you need to shift a belief from somewhat fanatical to a little bit more balanced and stable. So you see how that theme just keeps repeating itself.
Maybe
Anyway, Mercury and Mars
get a
meeting in
repo
Sag during
going.
the cycle is also very interesting. Let's go back. See, I told you to jump around in order. Now, the new moon is also taking place in the bound of Mercury. So if we go back in time, here is the new moon in Sagittarius, and it is taking place in the bound of Mercury. Now, Mercury is stationing and turning retrograde, like literally within the day of the new moon, within
Saw your
24
message,
hours.
Toad.
So we have a
Sad
simultaneous,
about
the bound
Mandarino.
ruler turning retrograde. What is the bound ruler? People like to, people ask the question all the time. The best way to think of the bound ruler that I've come across so far is to think of it in terms of the planet Saturn. All the dignity categories, by the way, have interesting philosophical connections to the nature of different kinds of planets. For example, exaltations have an interesting connection to the moon, domicile rulers have an interesting connection to the sun, triplicity rulers have an interesting connection to Jupiter, and we have in the bound rulers an interesting connection to Saturn. So with the bound ruler, what you're thinking about is what kinds of expectations, prohibitions, restrictions, or structures is the new moon forced to work within? And notice here, this is freaking fantastic. Mercury's turning retrograde, which suggests the cycle has some kind of revisionary component. What is it turning retrograde into? A trine with
I think
Jupiter.
one more
PB,
turning direct. And I'm going to stop this grind because it's just, it's too much. That is
fantastic because it essentially suggests
I've decided that
practical,
because
stabilizing,
it's like one in 1,000 maybe successful attempts post glass for me. Right?
With our most passionate ideals, visions, the things we're connected to that are bigger than ourselves, but it'll also help us revise those.
There's no way I can do any other strat.
Features of our lives, so
I mean,
that they're more practically beneficial and useful.
I need to just do it and get lucky.
All the greatest ideas in the world are great,
like a test drive, like test driving a Ferrari.
To use them or to implement them into your lives,
you know what I mean?
Then you're not bridging heaven and earth.
Just do a couple runs for fun. If you see you get the blessed animation.
There's an alchemy. There's a yoga, a yoking.
But like a grind, I don't think I can do. I won't do
fiery Neptunian signature around the new
moon. Not after. I have one more PV in me and with the strat.
The bound rule.
Got one more, or like a no body armor.
Through Mercury's retrograde in Capricorn, a Saturn-ruled sign, trining Jupiter, who's turning direct.
What's up, man?
Taurus.
Bar the ledge.
Again,
how are you,
I
man?
love that connection. As the retrograde gets started, it is fantastic because Mercury can kind of break things apart. Things can start to deconstruct with Mercury, and especially in an Earth sign, you could feel like structures are sort of coming apart. But the trine to Jupiter suggests they're coming apart because it's like you're taking the Legos and rearranging them into a new structure. And the new structure is, you know, it's like you're modifying an existing one. It'd be like sort of like a renovation rather than a tear it down to the foundations and build it up again kind of thing. That's the image that comes to my mind anyway. So I love this because it suggests on another level that there's this kind of revision of Jupiterian values, beliefs, structures, very lofty, visionary, excitable energy, but then very practical, tangible ways of
it's so dumb. Look how fast this run was too. It was really, I'm gonna guess like 51.
I think it's also fascinating on the same note that, and I'm jumping around again here, this is number 8 on my list. I just couldn't decide. But then you have, as the cycle goes on, look, by December 20th,
still darker,
which is just after the first quarter moon, Pluto goes into the anaretic degree of Capricorn. Once again suggesting that the Plutonian ability to shift and transform deep
legend
structures of karma is peaking.
The man, the legend, the myth.
What a cool set of symbols we have in Earth signs that suggest that the ideal level of, at the ideal and sort of transcendental visionary level is being married to deep, practical, earthy transformation. All right, anyway. Now let's go into... See, the other thing that's really fascinating on the exact same note, and I'm jumping around again here, but look at what's happening on the winter solstice. Right as the sun crosses into Capricorn, which is the winter solstice in zodiacal language, but it could be the opposite solstice if you're in the southern hemisphere. Either way, on the solstice, the Capricorn solstice, we have Mercury Cazimi. Mercury Cazimi at the heart of the sun as the sun moves into an earth sign and simultaneously starts trining Jupiter. And what does the sun's trine to Jupiter indicate? Always in the superior cycles, synodic cycles between Sun and Mars, Sun and Jupiter, Sun and Saturn, that trine from same element to same element means that the planet is about to change directions. So here we have, after this, again, sort of very fiery, visionary kind of new moon, we have earthiness. Like over and over. The Mercury Cazimi at the heart of the sun on the solstice suggests a kind of a catalyst for change. It's sort of reiterated or amplified by Pluto at the anaretic degree, by Jupiter turning direct in an Earth sign. So I see this as a very empowered moment, almost like you know, the design or the blueprint that's being laid out through Mercury's retrograde and trine to Jupiter, who's turning direct, is being empowered. It's given all the tools it needs by the sun. It was the Cazimi was said to be Mercury, like sort of seated on the throne of the king. So he was an empowering moment for this Mercury who's trying to implement change. Of course, then Mercury backs into Sag, conjoins Mars, and hits the square to Neptune again, which once again says we are working in like two spheres, a visionary sphere and a sort of practical application sphere. Okay, so see how the pattern just reiterates all over again. It's really pretty cool. All right, then we're jumping around.
Hell, man.
Let's see, I'm just going through. I did that. Mercury trine Jupiter, we did that. Yeah, so the next one, I'm going to finish with the third decan as the final thing we look at. The next one is that Venus is also heading into an opposition with Uranus. So that Venus-Uranus opposition also comes on the 20th, just before the winter solstice. And, you know, Venus-Uranus, look at that, you know. Interesting that there is this, you know, here we have what looks to me like, again, it's almost like plans, visions, and orientations changing. Insights being crystallized, and so forth. Now all of a sudden we have a serious relational ramification where the goddess of love, relationships, friendships, lovers, sex, art, beauty, women, etc. is hitting an opposition to Uranus. This is a moment of tremendous freedom, growth, exploration, creativity, originality, breakthroughs, liberation in love and relationships. It's happening right in the midst of this. Makes me wonder, could some of these changes be helping us to free ourselves up, to love more, to love better, to love more freely, to love more authentically, to create change and healing and growth in relationships? This is a deep, cathartic moment with Venus in Scorpio opposing Uranus in Taurus. It's almost though all of this is going to change how we relate to other people, that there's a real relational component that comes in right around the 20th at the time of the solstice. Now, finally, I want to look at the third decan of Sagittarius. The new moon is happening right around
the duck.
Third decan,
that was such a blessed duck. This is the run.
The last 10 degrees of Sag tell a story. Let's take a look at that story together. And I want to put the card that I liked our author associating with the third decan the most.
So fast?
Up onto the screen. Sorry,
so fast it was.
All right, here we go. The 10 of Wands comes to mind. Anyway, this is Sagittarius 3, the third decan, where she actually also uses the world and temperance along with 10 of Wands. I'm going to read you some of what she says about the third decan. And again, this book is called 36 Secrets, A Decanic Journey Through the Minor Arcana of the Tarot by T. Susan Chang. I've been getting into the decans a little bit more lately, and I find that, you know, that it's not my favorite astrological tool, but I'm opening myself to it. Anyway, they are useful though, so my interest level does not indicate their level of importance. We have arrived at the final decan of Sagittarius. The northern sunlight is steadily diminishing, bound to reach its nadir at the conclusion of this period. Now remember, this is in the symbolic zodiacal language which came from the northern hemisphere. The arrow, propelled with ruthless swiftness by the archer's strength, buries its shaft in the bull's eye with a fatal thump. Bad. Almost 2/3 of the zodiacal year is spent, and we shall see no more of the fiery suit of wands till spring. Get back to Aries. Everywhere, folks are straining at max capacity. Somewhere along the line,
I could have done the crouch, but I mean, I was like, I would have had to turn around 180. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you can just go boom. Because I was head face right. Damn, that was fast.
The zodiacal major of temperance is Sagittarius, corresponding to long distances, far reaches, and high aspirations. Did you know?
Holy shit, that was really fast. That might have been my fastest attempt ever.
So it's worth asking, what happens when you try to carry the weight of the entire world on a long distance hike? I've said that the story of fire is a story of heroic adventure.
Right.
I call the Aries cards How to Aim High, the Leo cards How to Go Public, and the Sagittarius cards
Damn it, man, that was really, really fast.
Fire's elemental major is the Judgment card, in which our narrative is polished to its final degree. The 10 of Wands can be our greatest victory, the final forging of our legend, or we can literally flame out in an orgy of destruction that consumes either ourselves or others, or both. Doesn't that feel, isn't that interesting? There's this thought of like a culminating moment that's either a breakthrough or a collapse. The other thing we could have said about Neptune and all these aspects to Neptune is that that it can represent failure, exhaustion, defeat, giving up, trying to escape, drugging ourselves out, or putting ourselves to sleep, or numbing ourselves out because somehow the burden is too much. I chose a very heroic, optimistic way of looking at it, but it is true that all of the Neptunian signatures this month could be testing our faith. Can you push through to the end?
Man, that was really
courage
close.
And determination, holding to your vision.
I got boosted into the wall.
Even if you have to make some changes, can you do that?
If I got boosted around that wall, I might have survived.
Get exhausted, or will you get exhausted because you're a workaholic pushing too hard? It's fine line. A whole bundle of fascism, she says in the next section. The hermetic title of the Ten of Wands is the Lord of Oppression. While all tens carry tons of freight, none are as burdensome as the Ten of Wands. Why is that? Well, let's look at the themes we've explored in the Wands suit. Dominion, virtue, completion, strife, victory, valor, swiftness, strength, and now oppression. These are stations along a journey of conquest. Some are more easeful than others, but the fiery ambition of the suit of wands was always going to come to one of several charismatic ends: an epic victory to be immortalized in song and story, a crushing of the spirit beneath the weight of one's ego, think Citizen Kane, isn't that interesting, we just mentioned Citizen Kane recently, or the ruthless oppression of all who stand in one's way. You see how in all of those descriptions she's giving, there's a sense of like, do I go nuclear and fanatic and get crushed under the weight of my own ego and have to repair the damage, or is there some kind of immortal victory that is awaiting if I keep the right spirit and work, like sort of whistle while I work through the difficult end? One afternoon, having drawn the Ten of Wands and doing a very Ten of Wands chore, pruning and weeding the raspberry patch, I found myself listening to a podcast on fascism. This prompted me to look up the etymology of fascism, which I learned derives from fascis, I think that's how it's called, or fascis, a bundle of sticks, including sometimes an axe whose handle was tied into the bundle. This icon of ancient Rome symbolized the power of the state to exercise capital punishment, the ultimate form of control. So this card has come to be closely allied with the notion of authoritarianism, at least for me. In the fascist dynamic, both oppressor and oppressed bear burdens, though they are of different kinds. Tyrant has sacrificed his humanity for an end that justifies the means, and now he must forever defend the shell of his victory. The subjects, meanwhile, have lost their freedom and autonomy. Even as they strain under the yoke, the seeds of their eventual uprising already germinate. Hidden in their unrest, as the axe handle is hidden in the sticks, is the tyrant's fateful downfall. Now that tyrant could also be applied to a part of us that is being unrealistic, or too hard on ourselves, or that we don't have a compassionate enough vision, or that we don't recognize the current carrying us. We think we have to do all the rowing, in which case we're rowing against the current rather than going with it. You see how those themes have to do with how do we carry burdens and how do we get things accomplished. There's a lot of that also with Mercury trine Jupiter, the Sun trine Jupiter, in Capricorn and Taurus. Jupiter turning direct in Taurus. It's generally accepted that Smith took her inspiration for the Ten of Wands image from the Ten of Swords in the 15th century Sola Busca.
I was a bullet away.
I don't know if that's pronounced right, but black and white images of the Sola
Busca
were produced in 1907 and exhibited in London. The Waite-Smith collaboration took place in 1909. When you compare the two, the color palette is different, and of course, one has wands, one swords, but the framing, the body language, the awkwardness of the image is the same. If the bundle were on the bearer's back, it would be heavy but manageable. As it is, the bundle is precariously balanced, ergonomically ridiculous, and what's more, it's blocking his sight. Who carries anything like that? See, and there's that quality of like being blinded by something and maybe not carrying it in the right way. And we've had to make adjustments. And if we have made adjustments to how we're carrying something difficult, then maybe we have the foresight and flow to carry something through to completion. The fact is, those sticks are coming down, and the question I've been asking my clients over 20 years is this: where are you going to drop them? In front or behind you? Drop them behind you and you move on. Less empowered maybe, but baggage free. Drop them in front of you and you get to do this all over again. The other thing to consider is this: what are wands made of? Wood.
What is this? Why?
The main source of heating in my house is a wood stove. At the time of year indicated by this card, firewood is a big part of our lives. Back and forth to the wood pile, to the wood box, and the wood box to the stove, when we're not deep in that other winter task, shoveling the driveway. It's cyclical, hibernal drudgery. One thing I can tell you about building a fire is that if you load in too much wood, it won't light. Fire feeds on earth, but it needs air to breathe. so too can ambition stifle the talent and inspiration that surrounds it. See, these are great themes for this last this new moon in Sag square to Neptune, Mars square to Neptune, and also the significations of especially Mercury and Jupiter in Earth signs. I've often drawn the Ten of Wands with the Fool, which corresponds to elemental air. This I've taken as a reminder to breathe, lest the fires of your spirit suffocate under the Saturnian weight of your own expectations. I also drew the Ten of Wands when protests erupted over the murder of George Floyd in May 2020. George Floyd wasn't the first victim of police brutality to cry out, "I can't breathe," and unfortunately he is not likely to be the last. So there's a message in the card about the way authoritarianism literally stifles one's life breath. Stacked into cordwood, the 10 wands become fuel for barracks and beacons for revolution. They are the weight borne patiently for decades, but once they are ignited, a true conflagration will ensue. It will not stop until it has exhausted itself by consuming everything down to ash. That's a message in this card too. She goes on to talk about a few other things, but one of the things that I really appreciate about this is that she's really basically saying, how do we carry heavy things through to completion? And a part of whether we are able to or not depends on our attitude, how realistic we're being, how compromising, how flexible, how much we're willing to allow higher powers to help us carry the weight so that we can breathe. There's a hexagram in the I Ching that I cast that I didn't think to bring up formally, but it's called Worrying the Tiger. And it has to do with a person following a tiger like through the jungle. I heard one commentator put it this way, it was really beautiful. The tiger represents the power of heaven. So let's say that's a vision or a hope or an aspiration, something that you hope to get at the 10 of Wands, something that you've been pushing for with visionary zeal. So you follow the tiger through the jungle. You can't be too afraid to you have to walk closely behind the tiger to make sure you follow it to the destination. You can't walk too closely with too much ambition that you step on its tail, it'll bite you and it'll destroy you. At the same time, if you're afraid and you trail too far behind it, you won't see what it's doing and you'll lose the trail. So we have to walk this path when it comes to our ambitions. We have to follow the tiger knowing that it is the way and not us. That's an ego submission thing. We also can't, if we run too close to it, pushing ahead of it, our ego gets bitten and we drop the stack of wood and it's all over. On the other hand, if we don't take up the ambition at all, we don't take up the mission, the crusade, the vision, and follow closely behind the tiger with some courage, even though our heart's pounding, we also won't get where we want to go. So it's a tricky balance to figure all of that out.
Let's go.
Isn't it interesting that, this is all happening as Jupiter? One of the meanings of Jupiter in ancient astrology would be like
that was so lucky.
Now Jupiter
that was such a gift.
Excess,
that was not a gift.
It tends to be either excessive or sort of temperate. So, at any rate, the Jupiter theme turning direct in a Venus-ruled sign would show us something that is more stable.
It is what it is.
Have we learned a lesson about how to be more stable in the way that we do things? And can we learn it as we go, following something through to completion that we're very charismatic about? These are all different ways of looking at the significations of this lunar cycle. I hope that they have been useful to you and, that they help you think about what's to come in ways that are engaging, so that you can engage with the lunar cycle more meaningfully. Anyway, as you guys know, we are trying to reach 1,777 backers by New Year's, speaking of goals and carrying them through to completion. If you haven't already, please consider pitching into the Kickstarter. We thank you so much if you have. You can find the link to the Kickstarter, by the way, in the comment section pinned to the top or in the description of this video. Pick up 50% off any of my online courses, 75 when you bundle 3 or 4 courses together. 6 different programs we offer. There's other readings we offer that you can pick up through the Kickstarter, and some really interesting talks that I don't offer anywhere else.
I think I gotta
really appreciate your support.
I think I gotta do full look down there. Like I'm getting shot like crazy.
Have a great new moon.
Chinese are attacking my brother. At 160, no way. Sorry, bro. Are you serious? I'm sorry, man. Man, that was a bad big room. That was the worst big room ever. I got hit like 3-4 times. I think I gotta do full look down there for real. and look up when he gets the glass, so they break the glass or some shit. I don't know, man.
To hit your mark with this week's astrology, it's important to align your arrow to what it is that you desire the most, but pull back before you release forward.
Okay.
Hi, my name is
The target audience might not be us, but I think the material she says might be very good. I've never seen it before.
Astrological weather report for the week of December 11th to December 17th, 2023, where we are discussing, just as we do every single week, here in my cosmic corner of the internet, with a cosmic beverage in hand, here getting caffeinated and getting cosmic, letting you know what to expect for your week ahead, what sort of cosmic opportunities that you should seize, and what sort of celestial challenges you should navigate. And when it comes to this week's astrology, it's important to balance fantasy with reality. We have a Sagittarius new moon on December 12th that is a little untethered to reality. It's a little ungrounded, it's a little unrealistic, but it's sort of giving that energy around the delusion that works out. Do you have a friend like that, or someone within your universe like that, where somehow things just sort of work out for them, even if it feels really unrealistic when they call you and they're like, I'm gonna try to get a last-minute reservation at Interplanet Janet's Cafe, and you're like, good luck, that place is booked out for months, but wouldn't you know it, they call them up and they just so happen to have a cancellation, and oh, do you want this oceanside table? That's the one that was reserved. Or you're all planning on going to a music festival and you've had your ticket bought for months, you've had your Airbnb handled, you have all the details handled and planned, and then your friend is like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go, and you're like, tickets are sold out, I don't know how that's gonna work, but of course, they have a friend who's
really
giving away a
annoying.
ticket, they end up getting this sick Airbnb, like, do you know that energy? Do you have someone in your life where things just kind of work out?
No, I can't listen to this. I'm sorry.
That's sort of the energy with the new moon, where yes, there's that certain energy around, really, you're gonna get a reservation at that restaurant, okay, good luck. Oh, you're gonna get last minute tickets to this music festival, okay, like, see you there, see how that goes, but somehow they're there. Somehow it works out.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get more. See if there's another debate. There's this one, but let's see if there's more. I think he's only debate one person so far. 2 weeks ago, 14 minutes. Robert Shaw. Should we watch the Robert Schock? Let's do the Robert Schock. He has passed away. The late Dr. Robert Schock. He might not have passed away, actually. S-C-H. S-C-H-O-C-H. S-C-H. Where is it? Why can't I find it?
Well, his work,
Why didn't they don't even... Whatever. God. I like took it down or something.
The specific
I swear to
person
God, they
you're
took it
referring
down.
to
The silencer.
at the American Association for the Advancement of Science debate, which I just went to
Maybe
make
it's
the
on
comment.
Spotify.
I went into that thinking that was going to be a debate. I came out of it realizing that they were just trying to set me up to put me down and shut me up forever, which they were not successful in doing.
Why do you think that they're so reluctant to just listen to the evidence and look at the information and consider the possibility that maybe there had been an ancient civilization?
Oh my God.
Because it upsets the standard time.
Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
And we're live. Gentlemen, here we go again. What's happening?
Back in the room.
A pleasure to see you guys, as always. This is one of my favorite podcasts that we ever do.
Guys,
And
I know we may have seen
this
this,
is very
like,
timely.
I don't know how many
Because,
times,
first
but I
of all,
swear to
the
God,
big New York Times
I can't
article
remember
about
anything of it.
the possibility of a
How
comet
scary
hitting
is
Los
that?
Angeles, the preparations
I can't
for
remember a
what
word
they
of
would
it.
do if a comet hit Los Angeles. And the comet known as Donald Trump that's hit the United States. And
He's even got the hair.
it just, the whole thing is, I mean, if the end of the world was coming, boy, it's all on the wall. You know, the writing's all there. It's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the latest and the greatest?
Well, the latest and the greatest is, last year when we sat down with you, I think it was last November,
Yeah, it was almost a year.
got floated in the discussion the idea that this really important comet research that's going on, which is just changing our whole view of history and prehistory and of the future of humanity, that it would be good to make a film about this and crowdfund it. I actually mentioned that to the scientists, and they said what we really need is more funding for our research. And so they've inspired by your show, they have put out a crowdfunding campaign, which is linked on my website. It's the Comet Research Group, and it's a big story right now.
So how can people find it really quickly? It's Indiegogo, Comet Research Group.
Much quicker
No?
way. Just
Okay.
go to my website,
Okay.
grahamhancock.com, and there's a revolving banner which is the Comet Research Group. Click on that, and you're in business.
Beautiful. Okay, grahamhancock.com, and then crowdfunding for Comet Research. And so what are they trying to put together?
Well, they're wanting to. You see, the thing is, these guys have actually not had any official funding. This is a group of major, highly credentialed scientists who, for the last decade, have been investigating
thank you for being here.
extraordinary story of a massive series of comet
Thanks for being
impacts
you.
on the North American ice cap 12,800 years ago. That is the global cataclysm that wipes out a whole civilization from prehistory. So that's why it's of interest to me. They're not coming at it from that point of view. They're coming at it from rediscovering something that we'd lost about ourselves,
fuck,
something
man?
really important to understand the role of cataclysms in the story of the Earth. And they need to do much more research. So they need to go back to Greenland and look for the nanodiamonds in the Greenland ice cores. There's an ancient city which they're not revealing the name of, which they're pretty certain was wiped out by a comet impact about 4,500 years ago. They want to go there and investigate that. So there's a lot of field work they need to do to drive home this hypothesis, and to frankly, put down the opposition, because there's been so much opposition to this idea from people with vested interest in other theories that, and that's why these guys have not got funding. So the only place they're going to get funding to do this further research is from members of the general public, and that's what we're hoping that will happen. It's called the Comet Research Group. There's a banner on my site, and all the links are there to their crowdfunding, to their website, which is full of masses of scientific information, and to their Facebook page as well.
It is a very unusual thing, the fact that we know that comets and all sorts of various large objects have impacted the Earth. We see the craters, we know they exist, but it's so rarely discussed. It's so strange. If it wasn't for this article in the New York Times, I can't remember when the last time that even came up. And it's such a huge issue.
It's a massive
issue.
What up, it's a massive issue. Both Randall and I have
really
given a great deal of thought to this. And I
Why?
think
What is this?
The point is that catastrophes
I'm
are
sorry,
the
my
untold
man.
story of our past.
Mercury goes retrograde tomorrow.
We were given a little
which
hint
means
of it,
communication and
2013,
stuff,
Chelyabinsk
technology, internet,
Remember the event?
Yeah.
Now that
traffic,
was just a little cosmic speck. Came in, it was about 50 feet
things not
diameter,
working.
which is about, and it came in at a fairly
it's a
low
new
angle,
moon
blew up
tomorrow.
nearly 18,
Get that thing right in front of you.
So
right
have to be
in front of
very
it, like this.
patient
Yeah, if you flatten it out.
tomorrow
it's usually
because
easier.
that's the previous
better?
video was talking
Alright.
about.
There we go.
So it
It was
came in, I
saying
think it exploded 12 miles,
You
about
need
20
to
kilometers up in the atmosphere, but it was still enough to damage
be
thousands
patient
of
because on a
buildings
Mercury retrograde on a
and
new
injure
moon,
1,500
that's a
people. Now,
slow
the thing
process.
about that one is if it had been slightly larger,
like,
if it had come in at a slightly steeper angle,
if
a
you don't
little
get a
bit higher
job,
velocity, you could
or your
have
car is
had
fucked,
thousands of
or you're in
fatalities
traffic,
rather than just injuries.
just know it's
And that
setting
would
up
have
something
been
better
major
for you for
headline
the
news
future.
at that point. As it was, it's already
Or your
forgotten.
internet's messed.
But you do remember
Yes.
that
Oh,
event
yeah.
over cyber? We may even have talked
I
about
believe
that.
we
I
did.
think we did, yeah.
I think
in
we
our
even
last-
showed videos of it. Well,
Yeah.
what's fascinating is that Russia has so many of those dash cam photo cameras.
That's right.
Because they have so much insurance fraud apparently over there, and people
Right.
slam into each other all the time, and they want to record it. So we're fortunate enough to have so many of those videos because of that.
Which puts it on the record, whereas otherwise it would not be. I think people don't like to talk about cataclysms and catastrophes, and actually nor do I. Nobody wants a horrible cataclysm to occur, but this is the point, which is that the prospect of a comet or asteroid cataclysm on the Earth is actually much higher than has been told to us up till now, and something can be done about it. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. We don't have to, say, okay, it's all over, forget about it. Quite the contrary. This is just something that would be prudent and rational for the human species to do. And amongst many other imprudent and irrational things that we focus on instead, we should be focusing on a bit on this.
Well, at least just to heighten awareness of it, and also the possibility that we've been nailed a bunch
Remember
of
the
times.
summer
and
of
we've forgotten.
2021,
And this
all
is-
the sleeping
this is the
streams
big
we
thing that
did,
you've been dealing with your entire
and all the
career,
cram
this
hand clock
skepticism
we'd fall
about
asleep
past
to.
civilizations. I mean, I got into it with
Fuck,
Michael
I
Shermer, who's a friend of
I didn't
mine, who's a
shoot
very
earlier.
famous skeptic. I got into him with it yesterday. Because I posted that you were going to be on, and he started chirping something about civilizations 12,000 years ago. Where's the evidence? I'm like, dude, you don't. You're saying this, and you don't even know about Göbekli Tepe. So I sent him Göbekli Tepe, and literally like 5 hours later, he wrote something claiming that, well, that was made by hunter-gatherers. It was all just really to sort of suit his narrative.
See,
but he doesn't know that. No one knows that.
Nobody knows that. They're so determined to keep the existing model. And when new evidence comes in which can't be explained by the existing model, they just try to explain away the new evidence and not think maybe it's time to change our theory. This is the unfortunate thing. But cataclysms, a global cataclysm, the massive event that happened 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas impacts, which were a series of comet impacts on the
Rogan.
North American ice cap. This
Who would have
accounts
thought
for
Joe
why
Rogan and
we
Donald
don't have
Trump
a lot
would
of
have been
evidence, hard evidence of a 12,000 plus
the
year old
people we would
civilization
listen
because
to
it wiped out
the
in that
most.
catastrophe. It was wiped out.
I've been trying to amass the
In
evidence
2020,
actually
and
that
Alex
complements
Jones.
what Graham is doing, and it really answers that question that Shermer brought up. And it's a legitimate question. Where's the evidence? But I'm quite sure that Shermer is not really educated in the extreme events that have really taken place on this planet in the last 10 to 20,000 years. And what that would do to any kind of evidence. And maybe while we have some time here today, I've brought a few things to try to convey some sense of how extreme some of these changes have been and how one would actually be quite shocked to find anything existing in the aftermath of these events.
Well, Michael Shermer's a brilliant guy.
Sure.
And I don't mean to shit on him, but what is disturbing to me is that his knee-jerk reaction to this, without having any research at all in the subject, not knowing at all about Göbekli Tepe, which was discovered in what, the 90s?
Yeah. 96.
So this is, to me, this is something that I've looked at because of you guys in great depth. When I read your book, I was just completely enthralled with this idea of history having some sort of or rise and fall and civilization having these resets. So I've been absorbed in it for a long time. But what's fascinating to me is people that consider themselves to be skeptical or I mean, he's a skeptic professionally.
Sure.
But many people who question anything that's outside of what they've been told. As soon as they hear any sort of a theory outside of what they've been told, they immediately call quackery.
Absolutely.
But it's a weird knee-jerk reaction to something, especially when you talk about asteroids,
Hey,
that is a very real part of our past. We have a ton of evidence. I mean, there's actual craters that you can look at on Earth. The moon, which has no atmosphere, is littered with them. And if we look at the moon as a model for what could possibly have happened to Earth, or at least, some of them, obviously with the moon having no atmosphere, it's going to get hit a lot more than we are.
Sure.
But still, I mean, this is a very real situation that this solar system, at least as far as we know, the only solar system has to deal with this. But we know this is a real issue. I mean, we've seen impacts.
Well, it's like you just said. On the one hand, you have Earth scientists looking at the Earth. And what they're realizing is that the Earth is pockmarked with scars. And each of these scars represents a tremendously powerful catastrophe that's happened in the history of the Earth. Now, that's accepted by mainstream science, that
it's so slow.
major catastrophes have happened in the history of the Earth. But where this thing now is about to come full circle is the recognition that these kinds of catastrophes have also influenced the rise and fall of civilization. And a lot more extremely than has been recognized up to this point. And while geologists and earth scientists are looking at the surface of the Earth and realizing that etched into the surface of the Earth or imprinted into the surface of the Earth are hundreds of scars, of which undoubtedly are only a small percentage of the total that exist. At the same time, astronomers are looking out into near-Earth space and discovering that we cohabit space with a lot of stuff. It's not as empty as we thought. And just within the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've had 2 close flybys. And
of previously undiscovered asteroids.
Of previously undiscovered asteroids.
This is the point, because NASA keeps saying, well, we've counted 1,650 asteroids, and none of them are going to hit the Earth in the next 100 years. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. But what about all the ones they haven't counted, which are estimated to run into hundreds of thousands, and which haven't been seen yet? And what happens is we see them roughly 10 days before they pass the Earth. That is not enough time to do anything about them. But we have time if we're prepared to be rational and reasonable.
If I'm going to go in like that.
Care of this issue.
Now, when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of near-Earth objects that are flying around, like what are the things that could be done to protect Earth?
You can paint, it's low tech actually. You can paint one side of the asteroid, affect its albedo so that the sun's rays push differentially on one side rather than the other. That will shift its orbit slightly. It has to be calculated. You can give it a little knock with a rocket, basically. You don't want to blow it up. You don't want to turn, your one big piece of artillery shell into buckshot. You don't want to do that. You want to move it into a safer orbit. You can mount jets on it. People are looking now to mining asteroids. Of course, our society always goes, our civilization always goes for the where the money's to be made. But if we can mine asteroids, we can move asteroids, and the technology is there.
And ironically, the most dangerous asteroids are going to be the ones that are the closest to the Earth, which are the most accessible. And the asteroids pretty much have unbelievable amounts of resources on them. I mean, pretty much everything that is being mined on the Earth can be found in asteroids, from the hydrocarbons to precious metals to all of these things. And we're not that far away from technologically being able to actually, mount expeditions to asteroids and mine them. And that's the solution I kind of prefer, because again, these things are tremendous sources of all kinds of things that would be usable to an expanding civilization, and we could feasibly within a decade or two be mining asteroids. And again, the ones that are the easiest to access are also going to be the ones that are more dangerous, because they're the ones that are coming the closest to the Earth. So
And another point here is that there is one specific danger. There's one specific, if you like, region of the sky that really needs to be looked at. And this is the region of the sky. This is why I wrote Magicians of the Gods, because of this discovery, that there's a thing called the Taurid meteor stream, which is 30 million kilometers wide, and which envelops the solar system. And the Earth on its orbit around the sun passes through the Taurid meteor stream twice a year. Turns out the Taurid meteor stream is the debris of a giant comet that came into the inner solar system about 20,000 years ago. That thing was at least 100 kilometers in diameter, according to their calculations. It may have been more so. And then, like other comets like Shoemaker-Levy 9, which spectacularly hit Jupiter in 1994, it began to break up into multiple fragments. And those carry on orbiting on the original path, and as they break up more and more, they degrade, and small bits and large bits break off, and it gradually fills up a kind of huge hoop of debris that the Earth is passing through twice a year. It takes us 12 days to pass through it. We do 2.5 million kilometers a day on our orbital path, 12 days to get through the Taurid meteor stream. And the scientists of the Comet Research Group have made the point that a big object out of the Taurid meteor stream, multiple objects as a matter of fact, was what hit the North American ice cap 12,800 years ago. It looks like there was a second series of impacts 11,600 years ago from the same source. It looks like there were other impacts in the Bronze Age. The most recent, almost definite impact out of the Taurid meteor stream was Tunguska in Siberia back in 1908. That hit on the 30th of June, 1908, and that's at the peak of the Taurid June shower, when we passed through the Taurids in June and in November. And what they're saying is we really need to focus on this Taurid meteor stream. Their calculations are that there are hundreds and hundreds of massive objects in that Taurid meteor stream. And you know, as a comet breaks up into bits, those bits become asteroids, and those asteroids are circling in the Taurid meteor stream. And I've likened it to strapping on a blindfold and crossing an 8-lane interstate twice a year, and just hoping that we don't hit any heavy traffic, you know, that we meet bicycles or motorcycles rather than trucks. But the trucks are out there, and what the Comet Research Group scientists are saying is we need now to be in-depth investigating the Taurid meteor stream, because it appears to be the hidden hand in human civilization. It has wiped out episodes of our history in the past, and there's no reason to expect that it won't do so again unless we do something about it, because the remnants of that original giant comet are still circling in the Taurid meteor stream, and they are fucking dangerous.
Now, how is this being received in mainstream science? I mean, is there any resistance to this? Because it seems like this is all pretty straightforward and traceable.
Mostly being ignored.
Mostly being ignored.
And why do you think that is?
By scientists who have a vested interest in other ideas. First of all, there's a vested interest in not admitting that cataclysms are important at all. This goes right back to the 19th century, when science began to take shape in the form that we know it now, and they wanted to separate themselves off, understandably, from superstition. So they didn't want anything to do with something that sounds like the biblical flood, for example. They felt they would be contaminated by that, and they preferred to explain any cataclysmic evidence as a result of gradual processes.
So you really think it's because of the reluctance to accept religion or religious ideas, or to separate themselves from it?
No, I think that's where it started.
That's where it started.
They wanted to separate themselves off from that. Now they've gone a long way from that, and many, many scientists have got a vested interest in what is called uniformitarianism or gradualism. And they don't like to hear about cataclysms having any major impact on the story of life on Earth.
So is it sort of the momentum of these initial desires to escape religious influence that have sort of led them down this path?
Yes. And then there are others who have a vested interest in current accounts of global warming, others who have a vested interest in extinctions taking place now. They want to say that our ancestors were responsible for the extinction of all the mammoths and mastodons and so on and so forth, whereas the Comet Research Group scientists are saying no. Those huge megafauna of North America were wiped out as a result of the massive series of impacts on the North American ice cap.
I'm reading a book right now by Dan Flores, a really interesting book called Coyote America. He's a wildlife historian, and he is really an expert on all the different forms of wildlife in North America, where they originated, where they migrated to. And one of the more fascinating things about it is he's talking about all these animals that went extinct, 10,000 plus years ago, this mass extinction event. And never once does he bring up cataclysms, and there's all these different there's different ideas, and one of the big ones being that
Why?
human beings with atlatls, which is like really a very weird sort of a spear throwing device, wiped out the woolly mammoths and all these other animals, and
To me,
it
it's a
seems
lunatic.
so preposterous.
It's a lunatic idea. Also, if you have any contact with hunter-gatherers today, you find that hunter-gatherer peoples don't overkill their game. They hunt them respectfully, they take what they need, and they leave the rest because it's a renewable resource for them. So I don't think hunter-gatherers wiped out the mammoths in North America. The evidence is compelling it was the comet.
Well, the evidence that you brought up when you were here the first time, when you showed the images of all those mammoths that had been literally knocked over with broken legs from the impact of something, mass burial grounds, like these mass, not burial grounds, obviously, but mass casualties.
Mortality sites.
Mortality sites. That's a good way of putting it.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, in fact, Graham and I visited one up in South Dakota called Hot Springs, where there's just several dozen. Nobody knows how many are actually there, but there's at least several dozen two species, woolly mammoths and Columbian mammoths, that have been entombed. And while we were there, interestingly, the guide giving us the tour there was kind of giving me a gradualist explanation that, well, over long periods of time, these mammoths
don't know who shot me there.
And were too dumb to get out, and so they became entombed. And I asked the question, well, what studies have been done on the sedimentary matrix in which their remains are being found? Because as I'm looking at this sedimentary matrix, I'm seeing a massive deposit. In other words, a deposit that was instantaneous. And when I brought that up, she actually got very irritated and
really,
dismissed my question. Didn't well, we've got it all worked out. We know about that. Well, what is it? Well, we've got it all worked out, and then immediately went on with her narrative. But yet I had an article that was actually written by one of the original scientists that worked on the site, and his description was, well, it could have been that, but also as an alternative, and he used the term bloat and float, that what you had was woolly mammoths that had been caught in a flood, drowned, and their bloated carcasses floated into a depression in the landscape, and that's where they were entombed. And that makes a whole lot more sense to me than the fact that, individually over several thousand years, these mammoths wandered into this sinkhole and then couldn't get out. But you got to bear in mind, we're talking about, at the end of the last ice age,
Chinese.
120 roughly species of
The
megafaunal
Chinese.
which is about equivalent to the same number of megafaunal species that inhabits the Earth today.
Well, it was a short period of time.
Are attacking your router.
65% of the North American
Sorry,
mammals went
I'm
extinct,
saying that
75%.
because of a
Very short
comment
period,
Toad
very
said
short period.
earlier.
Pretty much
If anyone just entered
totally
chat,
coincident with
or is
that
lurking.
period called the Younger Dryas.
And so there's nothing resembling what we're
he said the
capable of doing
Chinese are
today.
attacking my router.
When you look at human extinction events, human-caused extinction events, it's very logical. What we're doing today with pollution and the expanse of civilization and weapons are super sophisticated. If we wanted to, we could wipe out a lot of different species.
Yeah, but what we're
None of this is the case.
actually seeing is that at the end of what's called the Bowling Aileron, which was the gradual warming at the end of the last ice age that preceded the sudden catastrophic change at 12,800, was the Clovis culture that existed for 300 to 500 years, I think.
Yes.
Somewhere. But they suddenly were gone, right? Exactly simultaneous with the mammoths. And then there are interesting studies that coming out now showing that at least continental-wide, there was apparently a major human population crash, exactly coincident with the megafaunal extinctions, because you had quarries that had been mined for centuries that are suddenly abandoned. You have campsites that had been that had generations of debris and toolkits accumulating and so on, debris from the fluting of the spear points and so on, that are suddenly abandoned. Right? So the evidence actually suggests that the human population crashed, which would certainly imply that they would have been far less capable of wiping out all of these species of megafauna. Also, the studies of their diet and their life ways suggest that they were quite diverse. They were hunter-gatherers, and they focused mostly on small game. They had a lot of fish, a lot of shellfish. They gathered food. And why would they go after the biggest, most dangerous animal, in the whole array of animals?
And with incredible efficiency, hunt them to extinction in 100 years. It doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense.
It seems pretty silly. I mean, and
something
especially
else
when
from that time, if I may say, Randall mentioned the Clovis culture. This is, for a very long time, really until just a couple of years ago, all of the mainstream academics in the fields of archaeology and anthropology were saying there were no human beings in North America before, let's say, 13,000 years ago, give or take 500 years. And they came across the Bering Land Bridge, the Bering Strait at that time was above water, sea level was lower. They entered the Americas then, they weren't hit there before. Now in the last 2 to 3 years, there's just been a whole raft of new scientific research, and no scientist today is prepared to defend the Clovis model anymore. It's accepted, of course, that there have been human beings in America for 50,000, 60,000 years, and there's weird genetic links. Like, for example, there's a trace that connects Aboriginal Australians with North Americans. They had a common ancestor. It's a very peculiar thing that's going on. And so what happens is that actually these scientific models, which constrain and restrict research for so long, do get overthrown. And that Clovis model is being overthrown. And what the missing piece of the puzzle, I think, for everybody working in this field is the cataclysm, the comet. What happened between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, which changed everything.
Is it bizarre to you guys, or frustrating in any way, that this is not a mainstream idea? This is very much French.
Fucking hell, man.
It's not something that we don't have any evidence about.
Whenever I put out a book, immediately there's this huge hostile reaction to it.
Like the Michael Shermer thing.
Like the Michael Shermer thing. Like, I mean, I would say Magicians of the Gods, which I published in 2015, which deals with this whole comet issue, is actually the most thoroughly documented, the most thoroughly referenced book that I've ever written. It's calm, it's measured. They actually don't read it. They just say, oh, Hancock's brought out another book. He's a pseudoscientist. That's what they always call me, or a pseudo-archaeologist. And it's obviously rubbish because it disagrees with everything that we know. Well, that's the point of the heretic.
You figured out your modem.
To offer an
you can reset it? Are you reset it already?
And well-documented evidence. But
try
it
resetting
seems
it,
that we're dealing
or
with
unplug it and plug it in again or something.
Ingrained mindset,
Just be
which
careful.
is connected in curious ways to power structures in our society, that it's very difficult to change.
Absolutely. And like Graham mentioned earlier, there's kind of it went from a religious motive, I think, in the 19th century, and now it's more a political motive. And again, the idea that every day you'll find something coming from various factions that, oh, we're destroying the earth, and the earth has never suffered this kind of, assault on it before, and we're causing the 6th great mass extinction, and we're going to cause catastrophic global warming.
Like what?
Like what? 50 or 100 parts per million of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and so what that has done is, like many, I won't say many, but several of the scientists now that have been in the forefront of criticizing the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis are also very much involved in the global warming movement and the idea that we are now precipitating the 6th great mass extinction. Having looked now at mass extinctions and been really an obsession of mine for about 30 years now, I've looked at everything from the Cretaceous Tertiary, the Permian Triassic, right on down the line to the most recent one, which to me is really in some ways the most interesting, because the most recent mass extinction that we're talking about is the one that took place while we humans were part of the story. And
between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, the Younger Dryas.
Yes, the Younger Dryas, which is still an unexplained climate anomaly that happened. And I mentioned this, I think, in previous broadcasts, that, what you had this spasm of extreme warming followed by rapid shifting into extreme cold, literally within a matter of a few years. And we're talking about...
Why did it do that? Like, what?
Up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit within...
That was like the worst animation of all time.
Which utterly dwarfs anything that we've experienced in since the Industrial Revolution.
So dumb.
And we still don't really understand. And that's why this research is so important, because now we understand that there was something cosmic that happened. It's left its imprint in the landscape over...
Good thing you have turbo, dude. No ads.
Yeah, over 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface. Just a giant debris field of there's stuff that is only produced by massive impacts. These things come in at 70,000 miles an hour. And, if they have any diameter at all, if they're 100 meters or more in diameter, they are going to hit the Earth really hard. They're not going to burn up in the atmosphere. And when they do, they pack a
random grenade explosion?
huge amount of
Like, it's
heat
just too much,
and
man.
shock, and that creates
This game is
very
too much. The
intimate
random
chemical
grenade.
products, so nanodiamonds, so carbon spherules, so melt glass, that's like the trinitite that was produced in nuclear explosions. All of these, when they're all found together in the same layer of soil, and when you can put a date on that layer of soil, and when it's all over the world, there's only one thing can explain them: a massive cosmic impact.
I don't understand why this is controversial. I really don't. I mean, I do. I understand it because I know that once people start teaching things, once people start doing lectures and giving speeches, they want to stick to their guns, and they want to somehow or another avoid anything.
Yeah, I look down more there. There's more look down there.
This is a game.
Let's see this time.
This information, it changes everything. It changes.
No, that was so slow. That was so. Remember the 112 that passed away there? That was a 122 pass away.
People in academia are reluctant to embrace that change, and they're afraid of being called
That's 10 seconds
because there's a
slower.
whole lobby of skeptics who use this word pseudoscientist or pseudo-archaeologist as an instant dismissal of other ideas. And those who are in the profession, they don't want to get tarred with that brush. They want to keep themselves clean and pure.
I understand that, but you're talking about hard evidence.
Yeah.
You're talking about this nuclear glass. You're talking about nanodiamonds. You're talking about core samples that show this massive shift when you do the ice core samples, massive shift in temperature. And you're talking about very clear evidence of impacts that we know exist. It's not like a comet's a theory.
No.
It's not like it's Bigfoot or something. Like, you know, like we're looking for the final piece of evidence that shows that comet is a real thing.
Exactly.
It's real.
It's totally real, but it's so
Joe Rogan sounds like a genius
those who
in
are
this
invested in the models to accept, and unfortunately they have the
podcast.
ear of the media. There are. Oh, by the way, all the scientists in the Comet Research Group are absolutely mainstream scientists, and they have taken a lot of flack from their colleagues for even daring to investigate this area. That's why they've had no funding. They've had to fund themselves
It's
all
so
the way
crazy.
along.
That is so crazy. Because this is not a controversial thing in my mind.
Should
I mean,
not be.
It should not be. This is not an airy-fairy thing. We're not talking about psychics. We're not talking about UFOs. We're talking about something we know exists.
Yeah.
So to bury your head in the sand over something like this seems to me
Vested
so
interest.
preposterous.
Vested interest. Right now, NASA is spending the equivalent of one attack helicopter a year on investigating the comet and asteroid danger. $50 million a year.
That's not that much.
It's peanuts. It's a minuscule sum. But hundreds of billions of dollars on massive, sophisticated military equipment, which we can use to slaughter one another in ever more sophisticated ways. But just $50 million a year on saving the Earth from a potential cataclysm that could put our civilization back into the Stone Age tomorrow.
And I don't mean to keep harping on Michael Shermer because I like Michael, but that he highlights this sort of natural inclination
This is so
to poke
fast.
fun at something that he has done no research on whatsoever. When I pointed out Göbekli Tepe and I sent him some articles from National
help, bro.
Geographic, he went radio silent. I mean, because
he should know about it.
It's
It's astonishing the number of people
without
who
mocking it.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to mock it, you should actually know what you're mocking.
Yeah. And to say that Göbekli Tepe was created by hunter-gatherers, well, I'm sorry, that's just a theory. That's not a fact.
It
I mean,
doesn't
you have,
seem very
you have a
reasonable either.
sophisticated site with astronomical alignments, with hundreds and hundreds of megalithic pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, the world's first perfectly aligned north-south building, which you can only do with astronomy. It's not enough to say, oh, they were just hunter-gatherers. There was something extraordinary.
Stones from a half a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some serious sophistication. I mean, how big were these stones?
Well, the biggest one actually is still in the quarry. They left it because it had a fault in it. They clearly intended to move it. 50 tons. You're looking at 20-foot high objects, and then it's the putting together of them. See, here's the problem. Hunter-gatherer societies are not the kinds of societies that produce large-scale fixed monuments. Why? Because they don't generate a surplus.
I don't know
You
who
can't
shot me there.
pay for somebody to become an architect and for of those times.
I just
for
got like
somebody to become an
randomly
astronomer.
hit by
You're busy hunting
nothing
and gathering,
when
and
I
that's what you
entered.
do.
I think the lag
Agriculture
like
generates a
just
surplus. And that's
hit me.
that
It
is
was
the
dumb.
problem at Göbekli Tepe, because there is no background. This site just appears out of nowhere amidst what appears to be a hunter-gatherer community, but what they're not considering is the possibility we're looking at a technology transfer, that the survivors of a lost civilization who already had all that knowledge came to Göbekli Tepe and used that site as a center of initiation to teach the local hunter-gatherers how to do agriculture. And that's now taken as the beginnings of civilization. I would say it is the reinvention or the remaking of civilization.
So when we're looking back at Sumer and any artifacts we find in ancient Mesopotamia in that area, Iraq, those are the people that are sort of reinventing and relearning.
Well, that's
Hence
the thing.
all the
Actually, when we talk of Mesopotamia, which means between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Göbekli Tepe is sitting right there in the headwaters between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we cannot separate that from the later cultures that enter history 5,000, 6,000 years ago. They're part of the lineage that descended from Göbekli Tepe times. And what's fascinating about Göbekli Tepe is the way it doesn't fit, the way there's no background to it, that you would expect to see them practicing, learning architectural skills. The oldest stuff should be the worst, and as they carry on, it gets better. That site ran for 1,000 years. The best stuff is the oldest. 1,000 years later, what they were producing wasn't so good. This is a real anomaly, and it needs to be investigated, not mocked by skeptics, but actually explored to consider maybe this does rock the whole paradigm.
And it's kind of ironic that in their desire to get away from the ancient myths,
dude, now that you got the big screen
they've
TV,
ignored those ancient myths and tales, which
is it a
all
smart
talk
TV?
about cataclysms.
Well, part of our modern psychology.
Or you can get like a Fire Stick.
So
you can watch Twitch on the TV like that. Since you're turbo, there'll be no ads. It'll be amazing.
Almost as as if the workings of children. It requires a major.
I know what you mean. I like watching it on computer.
Admit or accept that our
You
ancestors
can
may have been far more sophisticated.
go to random places like 4chan and
in our 19th century models, which basically still dominate thinking.
download your furry
And,
wallpapers.
in Graham's book, he devotes several chapters to the story of one 20th century heretic, J. Harlan Bretz. And his story, to me, kind of encapsulates the whole process of forcing his paradigm shift. And for years, he was out there exploring this evidence that there had been this tremendous flooding in Washington state. And all of his critics were dismissive without ever even going out and looking at the evidence firsthand in the field. But what he did was he stuck to his guns for 3 decades and continued to amass evidence to the point where they just couldn't dismiss it anymore. And finally, a group of them went out and began to explore the landscapes for themselves. And one of the leaders, I think you talked about it in your book, James Galooly, who was sort of the leader of the skeptic faction that had set out, their sole purpose was to discredit and lay this whole flood heresy to rest once and for all. But he went out in the field, and they spent about 8 days in the field, where he's seeing this evidence for himself over and over again. And when you look at just one piece of it, you might be able to say, okay, there's all other explanations for that. But what happens is when you get multiple lines of evidence all converging, and there's no way to
We're so close, guys.
explain away each one of those things.
Maybe I should look down on the way back too, honestly.
This James Galooly was honest enough so that after a week out there, they were at a place called Palouse Falls in southern Washington, which was one of these areas where these tremendous inland tsunamis swept across the land. And I actually just visited there about 8 weeks ago when I took a group of people out there and took them to Palouse Falls to show them right on the spot where James Galooly was standing when he finally had his epiphany.
Do you have any images of that you brought with us?
I have images. I can dig them up here. Yeah,
okay.
I sure do. Yeah, I've got some really interesting images to show you, which relates, because see, this flooding stuff relates directly to the idea of the impact. And we can get into a little bit of that, explaining how these parallel lines of evidence are now converging. But the interesting thing about Galooly was that...
Okay, who shot me? He's still alive? I thought I passed him away. What?
He wandered off by himself for a long time, away from the group, and was standing there looking at this massive cataract with 400-foot cliffs and this little tiny ribbon of water flowing over it and this huge canyon below it and these big boulders. And he had seen, for a whole week, he'd been seeing this stuff. And it finally got to the point where it was undeniable. And he walked back to the group, and the words out of his mouth verbatim were, "How could I have been so wrong?" And he finally admitted. And that was like a turning point. And now, and again, Graham describes this very effectively in the book, how
We'll get it like a Roku. Your TV should be a smart TV. If it's 4K, 4K definition, it's definitely smart.
To avoid the fact that it was something so anomalous and such a departure
Should
from
be,
our
is it
modern
not?
experience
That's okay if it's
they
not,
had to
bro.
look outside
I
of
totally
our modern
understand.
experience to find an explanation. What they wanted to do was find something within our modern experience, and this is the cornerstone of the uniformitarian approach. Is that
that one's
a
not
modern
smart.
example,
I
and we extrapolate
understand.
backwards from that. And,
Dang, sorry,
so
dude.
what they did was they saw, well,
I understand now.
in the modern world,
What a
we have
dilemma.
Proglacial lakes, that form in front of glaciers, and sometimes these proglacial lakes might be held in by an ice dam or another glacier. These ice dams will
You can get a Fire Stick or a Roku.
flooding. They're very common up in Iceland because you've got several volcanoes under the
But I guess you want your
Icelandic
PC
ice
there.
sheets.
I
And up there
understand.
they
Yeah.
use the term Jökulhlaups to describe these outburst floods. But here's the thing. When you look at the modern versions of it, you basically are looking at floods that are less than 1,000.
Scotty uses the Roku.
Single flow from these floods we're talking about that happened, 12 and 13,000.
Yeah. Oh wow,
years ago.
really? They don't exist? Wow, that's crazy.
Less than 1,000 in peak discharge and in
That's
total
crazy,
volume.
dude.
And so
They usually
it has been admitted in several
they
places. I've
usually
extracted the quote saying,
market them
"Well,
for
we
like
do
kids'
admit that
rooms.
this is a major
So you would think for
extrapolation
sure
upwards, but
it would be
never
smart, right?
mind.
Because they have like YouTube Kids on there and stuff.
See, Harlan Bretz, for 30 years, was walking the walk in the Channel Scablands.
That's what I saw when I was shopping TVs. The smaller ones were like for kids. Kids' room, playrooms.
Which actually rose and fell within 3 weeks. And he went through decades of being put aside by his colleagues, insulted. They mocked him, they laughed at him, just as the skeptics do today. But gradually the evidence began to mount, and they couldn't deny it anymore, that there had been flooding. And actually, eventually, they gave Harlan Bretz, J. Harlan Bretz,
I mean,
the
I'm
Pepperell's
not
Medal,
I'm
which
not
is the
like
ultimate, the ultimate
comparing
bestowal
sizes,
of
but what's really
geology in
interesting, I'm
America.
playing
He
on a
got the accolade.
32-inch
And he
CRT
said
right
that he
now.
was more than 90 years old at that time, and he said at that time, he said, "All my
Really
enemies
beautiful
are dead,
TV,
so I have no
RCA,
one left to gloat over."
color track
But
plus
the point is, in a
32
way, there
inch.
was nothing to gloat about, because
Beautiful
what they
TV.
did was they
Blessed TV, thank you,
separated
TV.
him from his central
Thank you,
idea.
God.
Instead of
This
accepting that
TV.
there had been one huge flood, and
So
that
it
was
just
always his
it's a
view,
beautiful
they
experience
said,
every time I
there must have
play.
been 70 or 80 floods
It's just so
that
nice.
caused all this damage, and that's
I can
what
see
that's
the
what
hieroglyphs.
we are seriously challenging right now.
It's so ironic
So well.
in a way that the human desire for knowledge
No,
is
really,
what
it's really
has
nice.
led us to where we are today. We have this insatiable desire for knowledge and for innovation, but that same human desire to
really
achieve
blessed.
is also what's the ego's responsible for that. And the ego blocks anything that's contrary to what you've already established as fact.
Exactly.
As soon as you see something that might throw a monkey wrench into the gears
Yo,
of
Sailor
what
Chris,
you've
what's up,
been
bro?
teaching and practicing your whole life, and I know that you've
There's
gone
no
through
official
this
Twitch
with
app on
your
Roku. No,
whole
are you
issue with the
serious?
Sphinx and with,
Wow,
Dr. Schock,
that is
with,
lame.
John Anthony West
That's
was
so
on the podcast.
Amazon.
Just
That's
recently.
so
Yeah, he's
Jeff
amazing.
Bezos.
By the way, I'm going to be doing an event in
Are
New
you
York with
serious?
John Anthony West
When?
on the 29th of November.
Wow.
Where?
It's in it again.
So
it's
how do
linked
you-
on my website. The
Okay.
de-
Yeah,
the
you have
details
to
are
use
on
the
the
Fire
Fox
Stick or
events
some
page.
bullshit
It's
because it's
in
made
some
by
church somewhere,
Amazon?
but I'm gonna give a
Wow.
presentation
Because it's
and then I'm gonna interview
made
John live
by
on
Amazon?
It's the first
No.
time I've ever done that.
Are you serious? They
kind of
did that?
podcasting
They
in a way.
actually did that?
He's an amazing.
I love
man,
that
yeah.
dude. And
Oh my God, they
Magical
actually
Egypt
did
is, I
that.
think one of the most important things that anybody could ever watch.
They
I think that
buy
DVD series
the
is just
platform and then they
it's
make
so
it
spectacular and so
proprietary.
fantastic. And
It's like they
next
didn't
to
even make
going
the
to Egypt with
platform.
that,
They
which I
just
haven't
bought
done,
it.
I
And then
think
you're gonna
that's
make it
probably the
proprietary?
second best thing. Just
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
And John is an example
Wow.
of why we need heritage.
I'm just so
This is
shocked.
the thing. You see that science today. Yes, you're right.
Well, in
we
bed,
have
but you
this thirst for
can't.
knowledge
Yeah,
and
oh
it's
my
human
God.
characteristic, but also we get
Yeah, I
invested
should
in
try to hook it
particular
up with
positions,
the
and when
computer,
people
like an
criticize those
HDMI
positions,
cable or
we take it
whatever,
as
if
an
you can.
existential threat, and where we get all angry and hot.
Dude,
and bothered. If we allow
that's
that
so
to happen to us, we
crazy.
don't
That's
give
not
place
like
to
they
heretics
made
in
it.
our society.
Because
And
with
we're never
Apple,
going
it's
to
like
do
sure
anything
they
wrong.
made the
We're going
OS
to
X,
get
they made
locked
their
down,
hardware.
ossified into
You know, if
the
they want to be
ecosystem.
assholes
We
and
need
like be
heretics. John
exclusive,
has
fine,
been the
whatever,
leading
right? But like
heretic
if you
on YouTube
buy
for decades, pointing out
platform
that
like
we should
Twitch
listen to what the ancient
and then you
Egyptians
make it
said,
exclusive.
that their civilization was not a development. It was a legacy. It was a legacy from the.
I think it's on
So
Xbox.
that casts me back again to this whole.
Yeah,
issue
it's on
of-
Xbox, man. Yeah, I stream from
Now,
it with
when
Xbox.
Göbekli Tepe was discovered,
Do you have an
it
Xbox
vindicated
or a
you in so many
PlayStation?
ways, but what are the possibilities, if any, of
Could do
more of
that.
these sites being explored and exposed? I mean, are there more that people are looking at right now? Are there any that are under the radar?
Just a year ago, at the bottom of
so
the Sicily
dumb, dude.
Channel, at a depth of more than 100.
Or you can just get the Fire Stick, I guess. So
for
cheap.
At least 9,000 years.
It's pretty
Is a
scary though,
huge megalithic
bringing in
site.
Amazon into your
Before the
into your
discovery of
house
Göbekli
as a
Tepe,
piece of
that
hardware.
site
For sure,
could
they're going to be
never have been
recording you,
explained. The dating is
100%.
absolutely
They're
definite.
definitely going to
Seas
be
rose and covered
sending
it
your
at least
location,
9,000 years ago. We
100%.
don't know how long it stood there before it was covered by the rising
Not like
seas. But there it
my
sits
Xbox doesn't
underwater,
do
and I
that
think
anyways.
Underwater discoveries are, and I've had a part to play
You
in
can
this,
turn on the Xbox by saying
are
Xbox
one of the
on.
ways forward. We need to
and
look at
it'll,
those
turn
areas
on.
because there was a 400-foot rise in sea level at the end of the Ice Age.
A Ring
Looking at
doorbell?
the amount
No
of land that
way.
would
The
be put
camera?
together in,
Yeah.
say, Europe and China,
Oh,
added together,
100%,
that amount
dude.
of land was swallowed
Like
by those rising
1,000%.
seas.
Every
And
house had that when I
archaeology has
delivered
largely
food. Oh my
proceeded
god.
without taking
And they
account
said
of
leave
those
it at the
lost lands.
door.
I'm
You
not saying they
know that
haven't
people are
looked
just
at all,
looking at
but they're
you through the
primarily in marine
camera.
archaeology interested in shipwrecks.
95% of
Now,
the people
this
said leave it at the
megalithic
door,
site,
and
is there
95% of
images
people
of
had
this
that
we can
camera.
There
look at
are,
anything here right now?
yeah.
It
I
was
can
the
can
most
probably find it.
Cyborg, cyberpunk
monolith at the bottom of the
week
Sicily
of my
Channel.
life.
Try that. A search on that.
Pull that up, Jamie.
Oh, no, you told. Yeah, I think you told me.